Hi everyone. Thank you all for being here despite the weather. It's really a huge pleasure and honor to be on the stage and to kick off this amazing festival. Thank you, Luigi, and grazie and Alessandro for the introduction. I'm really honored. So, this image that you see here is 1 week of my life from about 2 years ago. Here I counted and visualized all of my laughters for the week. When I laughed, who I was laughing with, who triggered my chuckling, and also if I were able to get one laughter out of them. I noted how intense they were and other details, creating a network of the people who were involved in my week of laughters, a portrait of a special week actually as I was back to my hometown in Italy visiting my family. On this other one, I mapped all of the interactions I had with my husband for one entire week. That was not easy. I recorded everything that he said or did that caused feelings on me. Positive feelings when he helped me, reassured me, carried stuff for me that are depicted on the left side, but also feeling of annoyance and irritations because of course he forgot to do something that he absolutely should have done or was unnecessarily stubborn or so on. And luckily I have more entries on the left side. I documented the context of the action, my feeling of course, and also recorded when I actually thanked him for positive interactions. I have 52 of such images as I visualized one entire year of my life this way week by week. And if you think that I'm a little obsessive, you're probably right. But clearly, from this visualization, you can learn much more about me than from these other ones, which are images that you're probably more familiar with and which you possibly have on your phone right now. Or charts for the steps you walked, pie charts for the quality of your sleeps, the path of your morning runs. In my day job, of course, I work with data. I'm one of the partners, as Maria Grazia was introducing, or Luigi was introducing, and the creative director at Accurat, a data visualization design firm that we started in Milan, Italy, and now I have a small office in New York where I live. And every day I am presented with challenges on how to make sense out of complex systems of information. And every day with my team, we address these challenges, we frame and we solve them through visual representations, as you can see from these reviews. And well, tonight I'm going to talk about data, but I'm not going to be talking about technology. I'm not going to be talking about computing system and algorithm, and definitely not about big data. I want to instead share with you how I've learned from my professional and personal practice that data not only can describe the objective world, but it can especially grasp and illustrate aspects, even intimate, personal aspects of our lives that we hardly associate with numbers. And in fact, in many of my recent projects, I try to adopt a broader definition of data, accepting also the more subjective, intimate, personal, and therefore imperfect aspects of the information systems that we live in. And this evening, I'm going to share with you some of the principles that guide my research in the hope that they can be an inspiration for you to see data from a different perspective and incorporate the warmest aspect of what we so-called call data in your work, and why not in your life. First of all, I often say that we should try to change the glasses and the lenses and the focus that we use to look at data. I often say that to understand data's true potential, sometimes we actually have to forget about them and see through them instead. Because data are always just a tool that we use to represent reality, but they are never the real thing. And to this regard, a peculiar challenge was presented to my team a few years ago by this woman. She came to us with a lot of data, but ultimately she wanted to tell one of the most human stories possible. She is Samantha Cristoforetti, and she has been the first Italian woman astronaut. So she contacted us before being launched on a 6-month-long expedition to the International Space Stations. She told us, I'm going to space, and I want to do something meaningful with the data of my mission to reach out to people. The mission to the International Space Station comes with terabytes of data about anything that you can possibly imagine. The orbits around Earth, the speed and position of the ISS, and all of the other thousands live streams from its sensors. A technology-driven approach would have taken us far from anything meaningful. This is exactly what we didn't want to do, and actually who needs that? But still, when we work with data, we're also compelled to use all of the numbers that we have to show the complexity and the power of our analysis all together. But what is the point of all these numbers? People are never interested in data for the sake of it, because numbers are never the point. They're always a means to an end. And the story that in this case we needed to tell is that there was a human being flying in space in a tin box above your head, and actually that you can always also see her with your naked eye on a clear night. So we decided to use data to create a connection between Samantha and all the people looking at her from below. We designed and developed Friends in Space, a web application that simply let you say hello to Samantha when she was orbiting above you, but also hello to all of the people who were online at the same time from all over the world. And all of these hellos left visible marks on the map as Samantha was flying by, as she was waving back every day at us using Twitter from the ISS. And this made people see the mission's data from a totally different perspective. It suddenly became much more about our human nature and our curiosity rather than numbers and technology. So data powered the experience, but a very simple human interaction was the drive. The very positive response with thousands of users taught me a very important lesson, that working with data means finding ways to transform the abstract and the uncountable into something that can be seen, felt, and reconnected to our lives, our curiosity, and our behaviors. When working with data, I always try to remind myself that, again, data is not the point, but it's instead a medium that we use to describe our reality. And data has this unique power to abstract our world, and it can really help us understand it according to very relevant different factors all of the times. And sometimes the most important factors to take into consideration to create a meaningful experience with data are not the obvious one. In 2017, the organizer of the TED conference came to us before the latest edition in Vancouver with the challenging briefs. How we can use data from the conference participants to create actual connections between them. As a creative agency working with visualization, we initially imagined to use an algorithm to match participants with similar profiles according to the information that they shared when registering, such as their job position, where they were from, and so on, and creating a global representation of them. But ultimately, in which way would this data be meaningful? And we decided to look for data in less obvious places. We created what we called data portraits of the people, of all of the people who were at TED, images that are being created before their eyes.
This is me like drawing on my iPad. Images based on people's answers to a series of questions and translated into a unique hand-drawn data-driven image where all of the colors, the symbols and positions of the elements that you're seeing is a direct translations of one person's answer. These images were then immediately printed on buttons that people would wear throughout the conference on top of their TED badge and used as a tool for sparking conversations and finding commonalities with each other's. We asked simple but evocative questions as you can read on the right on the legend, such as, which TED letter are you? Are you more technology, entertainment, or design? And do you get your best ideas after an adult beverage or while at work? How messy is your desk? Or how many unread emails in your inbox before you freak out? And people at TED were wearing their abstract symbols on their badges, and they would use them to identify similarities and differences with each other's at a glance, really as an excuse to introduce themselves, an icebreaker to start a conversation. So we've been working here with soft and definitely small data that in this case proved to be much more meaningful than anything that we could have gathered digitally or automatically, creating a set of images that uniquely represented the combination of thoughts and ideas of a single person. And I'm actually now expanding on this concept, for example, for what I recently did for Story, which is a wonderful concept store in Chelsea, in New York. Every 2 months, the store is curated just like a magazine, and it reimagines itself and the products that are sold according to around a particular concept. And in April, they debuted an issue around the future of work, and they asked me to design a visualization finding data on the topic. And I turned it into an opportunity to incorporate visitors' thoughts and ideas on the specific topic. As I did at TED, together with the organizers, we've created a set of questions that this time people who were visiting the store are answering on site. And I've created a system, a grid on the wall, on the space to accommodate all of the answers according to a legend. And the people who work at story are filling the grid as they collect people answers. Creating this instruction-based data wallpaper that adds to the space the point of view of its visitors on the topic. And it's actually still evolving as the concept story is still on. But the idea is the same. And well, especially when we work with not so small data, and especially as data grows in number and type, I believe it is our duty and responsibilities, at least mine as a practitioner who worked with data, to create ways to effectively visualize, effectively and properly display what is in the numbers that we're working with. And sometimes that means creating new symbols, new alphabets, and new languages to convey them. I talked about how data for me is the medium that I have to tell, to represent reality. But equally, the stories that we are working with, the data that we're working with, should define the form, the visual model that we use to represent it. And there's really a value in generating visual representations that are tailored, if you leave me the term, to the data point at hand. Because, for example, what these two charts represent is actually very different. They work with different units. The one on the left and the one on the left bar represent a time interval, while on the other one they represent a categorization of a product. The values on the vertical axis are very different, but somehow people in business think that it makes sense to fill a very long report presentation with graphs that looks the same, even if they say completely different things. I think it's confusing, and I think we should make an effort to find new ways to reflect exactly what is in the numbers. And I want to show you, to this point, actually a pretty old project that we at Accurat used as our playground to create data visualization that were completely customized to the very data that we were working with. It's our 2-year-long collaboration with Corriere della Sera, which is the main Italian newspaper, and especially their Sunday cultural supplement, where from 2012 to 2014, we produced more than 40 data analysis and visualization, as you can see from these reviews. And we would almost every week visualize rich stories made of data, combining different data points and cultural and social phenomena with many layers of context for these stories, and ultimately building, as you can see from these previews, a very customized representation that are not standard charts. We have been combining and visualizing qualitative and quantitative data about many different topics, from the Nobel Prizes and laureates over time, depicting their age at the time of the award, the university of affiliation, their degree and nationality, and composing this rich and conventional visual score made of data, to depicting the masterpieces of the most important painters over the years, their main colors, their sizes, their technique, but also when in life the artist created them, every time going to discover some curiosity out of this combination of data. And also here comparing institutional recognized masterpieces with a popular choice, the first result in Google Images for the name of the painter. And of course here the topic and the data ultimately really influence the visual representation, as you can see. To investigating phenomena such as the one of the brain drain, researchers who move out from their own country and move to other countries, exploring the many contextual conditions that might influence the choice of moving abroad and representing them in a unique way. And these are the preliminary sketches and phases to build the actual visualization. And imagine that here people could really take the time to learn how to read our images and to physically dig deep into a big newspaper as they were really navigating the image. And what I want to say here is that there is a true value in designing visual representations that, again, are completely specific to the content that you're working with and to their very context. Because the more data we are producing, the more we need to experiment in new languages that can go beyond convention to really encode the variety and the richness of the story that we will need to tell through data. And a crucial question is, how do we go to design these new languages once that we have the data at hand? I believe that we need to start by learning how to see, how to look around, and also how to look beyond. Observation is a very important part of my personal process, and I actually look for inspiration in less obvious places as I work with data. I always suggest designers to not get inspired by already existing data visualization when they work on their projects, but rather looking outside in the world. I am personally mostly inspired by visual languages such as abstract art or the repetitive aesthetics of music notations, but also the layering system of architectural drawings, as you might already seen from what I showed you up until now. And this process of learning how to see gives us, designers, a huge variety of visual opportunities to represent data in a unique way. And this can be extremely useful, especially when you want your data-driven product to look unique and recognizable. And I'll show you what I mean with another project. Last year, we've had the great honor to help IBM Design release their first data visualization guidelines. And to give you a bit of a context, in 2012, IBM's head of design, Phil Gilbert, set out a bold vision to include in his team hundreds of designers and to train its entire workforce to think and work like designers. And by the end of 2016, IBM had more than tripled its design staff, hiring almost 2,000 designers. And so to make this integration possible, IBM released their first public version of its own design language with guidelines on colors, fonts, grids, and everything that a graphic designer or a web designer should know to continue building products that would look and feel like IBM. But IBM has also more than thousands of data analytic products, so they needed to find a way to create a unified data visualization language across their organization, and this is why they hired us, of course. So in the early phases of the process, we collaborated with many different product teams at IBM Design, digging deep into the type of data they were working with on a daily basis, understanding the roadblocks and the type of problems that they had. And the first part of the collaboration led to the design of high-level principle, like a practical guide on how to translate these numbers into charts in the very different contexts that we would encounter. But also, we needed to design a system of guidelines that uniquely represented the great design heritage that the company has clearly built over the years by working with great designers such as Paul Rand or the Eames. So we've been spending a lot of time looking back at the design expression of IBM's design, at the amazing posters that still shape our collective idea of the brand, for example. And we started to make some visual experiments. You can see from these initial artworks how IBM materialism shapes from the past could be analogies for new data visualization concepts. We also ventured into looking at physical objects, part of the IBM tradition. You can see here from this example how the texture of the numbered row and columns on IBM punch cards can look like single elements that can be interacted with in a data visualization. So we created an entire collection of chart models, visual styles, and animation guidelines that will inform all of the charts that are now included in the IBM design language. And looking for inspiration into IBM's design legacy not only led to the creation of visuals that look and feel like IBM, but it also helped us focus on visual perception principle and features that led to the design of completely new visual models that, again, leverage this principle to create more effective visuals for their specific type of dataset. And in this project, we have been asking ourselves what is the value that we as designers who work with data can bring to the table that we were called to contribute. And sometimes that means not only accepting but embracing the flaws of the material that we work with. Data is actually often imperfect because it's primarily human-made, and even if, for example, it comes from a sensor, well, a human being designed the sensors. So we all know very well from this point that data-driven doesn't mean unmistakably true. It never did and probably never will. But then we should also change how we conceive the visual representation of data and learn how to render the more qualitative and nuanced aspects of data, the imperfection and approximations. And to this point, this is a project that we released right before the United States presidential election. It's called WordPOTUS, and you can still find it online at wordpotus.com. So we teamed up with Google News Lab and using Google Trends data, so meaning what people were looking for on Google, and designed and developed a mobile application that visualized the search interest in the two candidates, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, for the US presidential election, and the main issues, the main topics of their political platform, but outside the United States. So we're looking here at how much the rest of the world search for Hillary or for Trump on Google, and how much they look for them in association with the hottest topic of their campaigns. So what was the world interested in? What did they care about? What were the differences in search behaviors between the different countries and continents in the world? So we can look at the world outside the United States and at the continental or at the country level, and you can always bring in the value for the US to have a vague but indicative sense of scale. The dimension of the bubble relates, of course, to the number of searches, and you can see countries arranged by similarities in search behavior, by geography, or also by recent trends falling or rising. And to put everything in context, we also added quotes from the candidate for every topic to give a little idea of information on her information on the position of the matter. But the question here is, was it by any means a precise measure of the country's interest in the topic? Not at all, but it still told us something. Opinions on such delicate topics are most of the time a fluid and always evolving blob, so that's why we decided to represent it like that. It's not a perfect depiction of reality, as Google Trends only give us a hunch of the general interest of the topic in each country. And so in situations of this kind, it doesn't really make sense to read if a bubble value is 52 or 57. It's a big bubble and it's bigger than another one, that's it. And our goal here has always been to represent people's interest in the topic and not simply the index and the numbers that has been used to measure that. So despite the idea that data visualization should always be precise and rigorous, I think that in certain cases we need to go for a softer depiction of data in a way, like a deliberately imperfect visual to grasp and display a meaningful but very human data set. So not all of the lessons that you can learn about data actually come from commissioned work and from big clients such as Google or IBM. I'm sharing now with you one of the most revolutionary projects of my life that made me realize very strongly what you can read here. It was actually a personal project outside my day job that took out practically all of my evenings and weekends for one entire year. Remember the hand-drawn data visualization of my weeks that you've seen in the beginning? Well, they have actually been used not only to document my year, but also to communicate myself to another person that I didn't know before. Her name is Stephanie Pozovic, and she's a London-based designer who shares with me the passion and obsession about data. We actually only met twice when we decided to run a very radical experiment, starting a communication using only data, no other language, and we also opted for using no technology whatsoever to share our data. In fact, our only means of communication would be through the old-fashioned post office. So for what we called Dear Data, every weekend for 1 year, we used our personal data to get to know each other. Personal data around weekly shared mundane topics, from our feelings to the interaction with our partners, from the compliments that we received to the sounds of our surroundings. 52 excuses in form of data to investigate and reveal particular aspects of ourselves and about our days. Information that we would then manually hand-drawn on a postcard-sized sheet of paper that we would every week send from London to New York, where I live, and from New York to London, where she lives, every Monday from 1 year. And eventually the postcards arrived at the other person's address with all of the scuff marks of his journey over the ocean. We purposely designed initial constraints for the postcard, so the front of the card contains no text or explanation at all. It's hopefully a beautiful drawing that one could just take as an illustration if they didn't know that there are data behind it. And the back of the postcard contains the address, of course, of the other person, the title of the project, and the legend, how to read our drawings, where we abstracted our design choices to let the other person understand what was in our data, what happened that week. And we didn't send each other any digital scan of our cards. We both have been eagerly waiting to get the weekly data portrait of the other person in the mailbox. We're discovering the pleasure also of checking your mailbox as you get home. It has been a type of slow data, small data, and incredibly analog data transmission. Yes, so during a time when everybody talks about big data and virtual reality, we of course do small data and physical postcards. It doesn't sound very revolutionary, but by removing technology from the equation, we were forced to extend ourselves as designers. On the one hand, we've each been forced to create 52 different visual languages to represent our weeks, as hand drawing with data listed the designs that are very tailored to the data you're working with. But also removing the computer from the equation triggered us to find new ways to look at data, again, as excuses to tell something about ourselves. For example, the very first week of Dear Data, which is a pretty cold and impersonal topic, how many times do we check the time in a week? So here's the front of my card, and you can see that every little symbol represents all of the times that I check the time, order per days and per hours, nothing really complicated here. But you can see in the legend how I added anecdotal details about those moments. In fact, a different type of symbols indicates why I was checking the time. What was I doing? Was I bored? Was I hungry? Was I late? Did I check it on purpose or just casually glance at the clock? And this is the key part, representing my days and my personality through my data collection. Stephanie and I spent 1 year collecting our data manually to force us to focus on all of the nuances that computer cannot gather, or at least not yet, using data to explore also our minds and not only our activities, like at week number 3, where we tracked the thank yous that we said and we received. When I realized that I thanked mostly the people that I don't know, I'm really apparently a compulsive thanker to waitresses and waiters, but I definitely don't thank enough the people who are close to me. We also ventured into more negative sharing, like in week 7 when we mapped our complaints, and I composed these musical complaint cards, borrowing visual inspiration from the music notation system to show the repetitiveness of my complaints over time. And then I added details about their type and their loudness. Did I truly need to complain? Figuring out that most of my complaints were completely avoidable. As the project evolved, we also discovered that we can even find data beyond the daily tracking and make a survey of what we own. Walk into our closets, for example, with the eyes of the data collector and looking for data in the way that we categorize and classify our garments, their colors, how often we wear them, which is quite an interesting thing that is telling a lot about a person. And that is what is telling about me that I shared the closet with my husband, now husband before a boyfriend, is that as you can see, he clearly has a much more optimized strategy when it comes to his outfits. I'm learning. Or we can also try to use data to become better human beings for at least 1 week and perform acts to then be able to report them, like this week when we intentionally smiled at strangers and tracked their reactions, if they smile back, if they pretended they didn't notice our smiles. So over 1 year, the process of actively noticing and counting these type of actions became a ritual, and it actually changed ourselves. We became much more in tune with ourselves and aware of our behavior and our surroundings. Stephanie and I connected at a very deep level through our shared data diary. We really became close friends thanks to our data. But we could do this only because we put ourselves in the numbers, adding the context of our very personal stories to them. It was really the only way to make them truly representative of ourselves. Dear Data was a personal project that led to many exhibitions and eventually to a book. And that has found the most exciting home as the original set of our cards has been acquired as part of the permanent collection of the Museum of Modern Art. But what excites me even more is that it was a personal project that was incredibly well received from the public outside the data community. We've seen thousands of postcards made by people who learned about the project and wanted to experiment on themselves. Even teachers of any grades are using this format to teach their students the world of data. It has opened the idea of data to a wider audience and made it more approachable and even more fun. And following the Dear Data book, and after seeing that people were so much into that, Stephanie and I are about to publish a second book that is an open-ended journal for people to learn to document their days in data, with lots of prompts and suggestions. It will be out in the fall, so stay tuned if you're curious. Okay, so with Dear Data, we showed that it's possible to turn even the smallest details of our lives into data that then we can look at if we ask the right questions. But I think it's equally important to know that besides personal data, we can do this anywhere and use apparently hidden layers of information to see things from a different perspective. I'm often asked, where do you find data? And I'm more and more replying that I often design my data sets, and I'll show you what I mean with another project. So last summer, I have had the huge honor to collaborate with Paola Antonelli, the Senior Curator of Architecture and Design at MoMA, and with her team on a data-driven artwork closing her newest exhibition on fashion. The show explored the present, the past, and sometimes the future of 111 items of clothing and accessories that have had a strong impact and influence on our culture. So among them are pieces as well known as and transformative as the Levi's 501, the Breton shirt, and the little black dress, but also as ancient and culturally charged as the sari, the pearl necklace, or the kippa. And I have had the incredible opportunity to create a site-specific, hand-drawn, of course, visualization on a huge 20-foot-tall wall in the 6th floor lobby, towering the visitors as they exited the exhibition, guiding them to explore the manifest, but also the implicit features of these items, both individually and as part of a bigger ecosystem. And what it's interesting here is that I didn't have any data. I only had the list of the 111 objects and the background research that was conducted by the curatorial team of each of them. So I put on the glasses of the data collector and I delved them laboriously into the 111 stories in search for bits of quantitative and qualitative information that could help me answer a few questions that I used to build my own data set. And so just because you don't immediately see numbers, it doesn't mean that there's no data to identify, collect, organize, and process. You can build a data set over very qualitative information if you know what questions to ask. And the question that I try to ask and answers are, for example, was the item a medium or a message? Meaning, was it considered modern because of its technical and aesthetical features or for what it represented? But also, is it worn to conform or to escape? Also, is it a cause or an effect? Meaning, was the item included in the show because its existence triggered a cultural social movement or because the object was the product of a specific movement? And then each one of the items became a symbol that I drew on the wall, positioned according to their origin over time and vertically grouped according to the flow of the exhibition. And then represented through these symbolic elements that indicate the intrinsic features that made them unique and influential. Where again, the visual features depend on the thought-provoking set of attributes that I defined to build the data set. And I'm not going to explain you the visualization in depth, everything is on my website, but what I want to say is that sometimes the meaningful data are not necessarily what are already available to us. So often when working with data, we tend to focus only on the numbers that are already there, without realizing that they can actually become much more meaningful and relevant if we're able to uncover a more nuanced and expressive type of data along with them. Over the years, I kept on refining the focus of my research and my mission and goals as a designer and an artist who worked with data, developing through my practice the principles and ideas that I shared with you tonight. And besides the more practical applications of these theories, on a personal level, I realized that I'm endlessly interested and fascinated in using data as a tool, as a lens to better understand our human nature. As I showed you, by distilling, in a way, our personal experience, our lives, our behaviors, the systems that we live in into what we, again, so coldly call data, and by actively building my data set, I'm really every time trying to discover, overlook details, and even grasp glimpses of humanity. But also, on the other hand, every time that data is available, every time that I'm presented with data, I try to humanize it, to make it speak our language. And I do so, as you've seen, often by combining what is a writing form of data with softer and more nuanced layers of information. So the last project that I'm going to show you, that is also the latest project that I worked on, is the one that made me really realize the importance of the data that we don't see. It's a collaboration with musician and composer Kaki King, that is also now a dear friend of mine. And unfortunately, it's a project that originated from an unlucky moment in her life. When last summer, her 3-year-old daughter, Cooper, was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition called ITP, It's an autoimmune disease where her body attacks her platelets and then leads to spontaneous bruises, burst blood vessels called petechia all over their body, and in the most serious cases, even internal bleeding. So when Kaki told me what was happening to her daughter, I really wanted to find a way to support, or at least to make clarity and sense in this terrible situation. At that point, Kaki and I had been collaborating professionally for a while. We started working together when design guru John Maeda called us to team up to create the new brand identity for the 200 years anniversary of the VSOP limited edition for Hennessy, where we designed a visual identity made of music and data visualization. And this is the result. But then Kaki and I fell in love with each other work immediately and decided to keep on exploring together. Early in 2017, we guided an audience of 2,000 people in the Opera Theatre in Cape Town on how to see music, based on a laborious dissection and representation of what Kaki were doing with their hands on her guitar as she played. And where both the song and the visual were actually informed by personal data collections from our lives. And coming back to this situation, ITP is a very visual disease if you think about it, and in this moment of uncertainty, I helped Kaki with a structure for how to observe what was happening. And she began to write down daily the level and intensity of Cooper's bruises and petechia, what treatment she had, her platelets numbers, but she also annotated the activity for the day and her own, Kaki's, level of fear and hope. And so we did so primarily to monitor Cooper's trends and to channel stress and anxiety into a semblance of control for what was possible. But also as a natural step further in our collaboration, we decided to share this journey. And I've created a data visualization out of that, but probably not exactly the type of medical data visualization that you would expect. As I was reading Kaki's record, I was really overwhelmed with feelings. These data are intimate and very intense, and I asked myself, can a data visualization evoke empathy and activate us also at an emotional level and not only at a cognitive one? Can looking at a data visualization make you feel part of a story of a human life? I structured this fluid timeline where each white element that we can call petals is a different day for a total of 4 months of a data collection. And the timeline is structured in sections that are moments in between readings, meaning when Cooper was admitted to the hospital to have her blood checked, because these moments really paced their days. So every time there's a lab test, we start a new group of petals, and the platelet counts from the lab test are represented by these red dots at the beginning of each group of days. And I should mention that the normal range for a platelet count is 150 to 400. So the numbers of 1, 7, and 10 that you see, and 30 that you see in the beginning have really powerful and frightening meaning. And then I began to incorporate Cooper's skin as was observed by Kaki. The intensity of the bruises for each day is represented by the purple and green splotches. The petechia are the small pink dots that you see on each petals. And I'm just getting back to the overview for a moment. When Cooper was taking steroids, you will see these gray shapes affecting the day. Here is when Cooper had some incidents, such as that caused her skin to worsen, such as she fell at the park or she got bitten by a mosquito. And you see how this fluid timeline begins to take form and visually narrate the tale of its months. But besides the medical data and observation on Cooper's skin, there was all that was going on in Kaki's life and in her mind. Kaki tours a lot, and she felt very stressed when away from home in this particular moment of time, and this is indicated with these black dots on the days she was gone. But in these dark months, there have also been positive moments, though, such as fun birthday party for Cooper and her brother, or a gray Halloween night, that I represented as this bright yellow spot that cheer up the visual in a way. And lastly, Kaki also kept track of her level of hope and her level of fear for the day, that she reported on a scale of 1 to 10 for both emotions, that I visualized through the floating lines framing the day, where the dark lines are her fears and the orange lines are her hopes. And all around, we added Kaki's personal note for the day. Ultimately, this data also became a piece of music that Kaki composed directly from the 4 months of data collection, and this is the score that she used as a base, where the timeline of the music represent what was happening in their life exactly as the data visualization that you saw. We premiered the project as a closed conference of healthcare executives in San Francisco at the end of January, where Kaki played the song live. And I'm going to play now for you part of the song, and I invite you to get immersed in this data and see if you feel something through data. As you can probably see, this is not by any means a scientific representation of data. Still, I think it paints a pretty complete and very sensorial picture of this very personal journey. This type of overlooked information, what's going on in people's lives, their feeling, they might be as important as clinical data and lab tests to frame a disease, especially from the point of view of a patient and their family. After we released the project publicly, we received hundreds and hundreds of very personal messages from parents, caregivers, healthcare practitioners, and in general human beings deeply moved by this story that we only told through data. I don't want to say that this can lead to any scientific breakthrough or medical breakthrough. This is not the point of my research. But I believe that radical experimentations of this kind, artistic experimentation of this kind, can be a starting point to reconsider what we define data in the first place. I hope that to this point you've seen that data is not only what we see at the first glance. Data are never only the hardcore numbers. They always come together with a more fluid, nuanced set of information that therefore requires new form of representations to be captured fully. What I want to leave you with tonight is what I call data humanism. In the Renaissance humanism, Europeans intellectuals put an end to the dark medieval time by placing the human nature instead of God at the center of their view of the world. And I believe something similar needs to happen with the universe of data. Now data are treated like a God, keeper of infallible truth for our present and our future. The experiences that I shared with you tonight taught me that to make data faithfully representative of our human nature, we need to start designing ways to include empathy, imperfection, and human qualities into how we collect, process, interpret, and display them. I do see a place where ultimately, instead of using data only to become more efficient, we will all use data to become more human. Thank you.